On today's Locked On Jayhawks, Bryson Tiller commits to Kansas. We break down on a bonus episode of the show what it means his scouting report with KU's newest five-star commit.
You are Locked On Jayhawks, your daily podcast on the Kansas Jayhawks. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Derek Johnson. You can find me on X at DJohnsonRadio. You can find me on Blue Sky at Derek Johnson. And this is Locked On Jayhawks. You can find our show anywhere you get your podcast, including on our YouTube page where you can like and subscribe to the show. And on today's edition, bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks, Bryson Tiller keeps the good times rolling for KU basketball on the recruiting trail. Another 4 or 5-star recruit, I guess, depending where you look, committing to Kansas. So we're going to get into what happened here. Scouting report on Tiller. I think it'll be an interesting fit with KU, so we'll get into that. And also what it means for KU next season and the class of 2025, which now has 3 commits over the past, 2 weeks now for KU. So it is really coming in hot and heavy at this point in time. So Bryson Tiller did a video earlier today where he committed on a 24/7 sports like live stream and had a pre-planned video that kind of went into all of that. And, I was over the course of the recruiting process. I think at one point in a past episode, I was like, I don't know that I'm buying the Bryson Tiller to Kansas thing, because I was just like, I think there were 3 visits, maybe even 4. I think a lot of them were unofficial visits with Tiller and KU. And I was just like, how often does a guy keep visiting that often and he doesn't commit? I guess you could say, well, they keep visiting, so there's clearly interest, but it's almost just like, okay, if the first time wasn't good enough, how many more do you need? But maybe in today's day and age of college basketball, there's just more to it, and there's more to it with the NIL and maybe going back and forth from that perspective. I don't entirely know. By the way, I'm generally curious if anybody clicks into this because of Bryson Tiller, the singer. So I guess this is good for SEO. But anyway, Tiller, he plays for City Reapers of Overtime Elite, or OTE, as it's called. He was recruited there from high school. He was offered $100,000 to play there. He turned that down, though, to maintain his collegiate eligibility. Now, I don't know now if that's allowed. I know there's certain states that you can take NIL money even in high school. So I don't know how that works. I guess that's not NIL money, that's salary. So again, I don't entirely know how that works. But again, he visited KU what felt like 3 or 4 times and ends up picking Kansas. He is a 6 foot, I guess it depends where you look, 6'9", 6'10", 240-pound power forward with a giant wingspan. 7'3" is the listed wingspan. And so that's a real common theme you look at with this KU recruiting class. Darren Peterson, 6'5", 6'10" wingspan. You look at Samis Calderon, who committed to the team earlier this week. I've seen some places that haven't met at 7'2", 7'3". I've seen somewhere else that even mentioned 7'5" wingspan. Let's say it's even 7'2". That's still a big wingspan. Then you think about Floyd Badunga possibly being back as a sophomore next season when these guys arrive, and he's got a 7'4" wingspan. That's going to be really hard to score inside on the interior on KU with all those guys with wingspans. But it will be interesting to see what position he plays at KU. Is he going to be a 4? Is he going to be a 5? More on that coming up in just a moment on this bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. Our episode today is brought to you by PrizePicks, the best place to get real money sports action. With over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings, PrizePicks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. You can run your game all season long on PrizePicks. And with PrizePicks, you now win up to 100 times your money with as little as 4 correct picks. They now offer Venmo for quick and easy deposits and withdrawals into your account this sports season. And you can sign up today and get $50 instantly when you play just $5. You don't even need to win to receive that $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. PrizePicks also offers weekly promotions that can lead to big payouts like Taco Tuesday. Each Tuesday, PrizePicks discounts select player projections up to 25%, provide even more value for your lineups. You can mix and match different sports too if you want. Justin Jefferson over receiving yards with Hunter Dickinson over rebounds for a specific game, and you can pick between 2 and 6, and it's that easy. Download the app today. Use code LOCKEDONCollege for $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app today, PrizePicks, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. You get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. PrizePicks, run your game with PrizePicks. Continuing on this bonus episode of the show, thank you if you're an everyday or tuning into each and every show. We'll have a recap for the KU basketball game against Oakland later today, and then the KU BYU recap might come like Sunday morning because that game is happening so late. So we'll wait and see on that. So information on Bryson Tiller, KU's newest commit. 24/7 Sports has him 20th as a 4-star. ESPN has him 26th as a 4-star. Rivals has him rated 21st overall as a 4-star, and then an On3, he is 23rd overall there. So you look at it, and basically everywhere you have a top 25 commit in the country, right? And so you end up with a kid who on the 24/7 composite, this is weird how this works because a lot of those places are like 4-stars, but with the composite where it's like factoring in these different things, he does end up being a 5-star on the 24/7 composite where he is the number 5 power forward. So I don't know how that entirely works. But anyway, here's a scouting report from Eric Bossy of 24/7 Sports. I'll just skim some of it. You can find the full scouting report there. One of the most polished front court players in the class, great positional size, and the type of skill you'd want to see in a modern day 4-man. He's capable of operating on the block or facing out to the 3-point line. Makes jump hooks, good passer out of the post, doesn't get sped up. There is range to hit shots beyond 20 feet, but sometimes he can settle for jumpers rather than playing to his size. And he's continuing to work on his ball handling and could really flourish if he becomes a more dedicated rebounder. Here's On3's scouting report. Bryson Tiller has a strong, physically developed frame with good length. He's a good athlete in straight lines, so more of like a straight line runner, not like, super agile, I guess you would say. When he plays from the mid post and he has a strong presence, he plays downhill off of one dribble, has a lot of success. This mentions him being active, high pointing the ball in terms of rebounding. He's a good rebounder and likes to dribble, looking to extend his range a little bit more consistently. He's a physical defender, good explosion, but there are questions about lateral movement. So I guess defending in space would be a big question here. For me, in some of the highlights that I watched, I would say I was really impressed with the transition dunks. He can, when he gets ahead of steam running in transition, he can throw down a big dunk on you. And obviously it helps to have, the size and the wingspan that he have. I really liked his passing feel as a big man. I think there are some similarities, especially if he is going to be a 4-man, which you read from some of these scouting reports. You think of like what KJ Adams has done. I don't think he's that type of passer. But I think there are some similarities in terms of being able to have your 4-man, be a really good passer in terms of what he's going to be able to do with the offense. So I think there's some similarities there. I thought he could definitely take, like, if you had more of a slower big or like more of a traditional big on him, I thought he was really good at off the dribble, especially from the high post, being able to kind of work through that. He was what I thought was an impressive rebounder. And you look at most of his like averages, right, for the playoffs last year for OT, I think he's been nursing an ankle injury, so I don't think he's played any games this year. But like, for the playoffs last year, he averaged 15.6 points, 8.1 rebounds, 2.6 assists, 1.4 blocks at OTE. During the regular season at OTE last year, 12.2 points, 9.4 rebounds, 2.1 assists, 1.6 blocks. Consistently, you're finding 7, 8, 9 rebounds per game from Bryson Tiller. So that's good to see there. I do think a lot of the highlights I watched were there weren't a lot of there were a lot of disjointed defenses, I guess would be the way that I would put it. I don't know that it's the best league in the world for like real basketball. They have this weird rule where you end up with like transition play and one guy has to like start at the baseline, but like, I guess it shows that you can be good in transition. And he certainly wasn't that. His team won it all in 2023. So that's cool. Albeit he had the Thompson twins. So that's 2 lottery picks. So that's going to help. I think if you're looking for like a KU comp, you could argue to me, he's like a more physical, much longer version, but not nearly as refined shooting version of Perry Ellis. Like you see some of the dribble moves of Perry Ellis, I guess, some of the spin moves, some of the touch of Perry Ellis, not quite as much touch, not as much shooting as Perry, but he's also longer to make up for it. I think there's actually a lot of, and getting to watch this guy even more during the basketball tournament for the KU team that they put together, Billy Preston. We never really got to see fully what he was going to be at KU. Got to see him a little bit more during that. I think there are some real shades of Billy Preston from what you get here from in terms of the game. Like Preston likes to take mid-range jump shots. He can dribble a little bit for a big man. I think Preston maybe a little bit more wing tendencies, but it seems like that's kind of the way things are going in terms of the game for Tiller. Now at 6'9", 6'10", 240, with that big of a wingspan, he can easily be a 5-man in the college game. And I think you'd be successful doing that because if you have a 5-man who can dribble it a little bit, has good touch, has the size to be able to do it, and can shoot a little bit, like you look at some of his OT stats, it hasn't happened consistently. He's typically between 20 to 33%, depending on what number you're looking at, mostly like in the high 20s. So he can do it. If that's your 5-man, like that's great. But if you're going to play him at the 4, you probably more so need like a 5-man like Hunter Dickinson in terms of being able to shoot the ball a little bit. Because basically, if you're going to continue playing this way with like 2 traditional bigs, I guess you would view it as, like one of the 4 or 5 needs to be taking like 2-3 threes a game on solid efficiency, in my opinion. So maybe it becomes more ideal for KU to play him at the 5. But you think about like next year, if KU has Flory Badunga back, I mean, I guess theoretically, like if Flory's playing 25 minutes, there's still 15 minutes to be had at the backup 5 in that situation. But there's even more minutes to be had at the 4 at that situation. So you watch some of his tape, he's dribbling, he's doing this or that. There's a lot of high-ranking big men that want to play like guards. Like think of like Carlton Bragg, right? Like he wanted to play that way. He wanted to take jump shots. And that never really fully meshed with Bill Self. Obviously, there was some off the floor stuff with Carlton Bragg. And I think Tiller is from everything I've seen, seems like that stuff's not going to happen. But I don't know. I guess who knows. But Tiller might think he's more of a 3-4. And in fact, I found this to be very interesting. I found this quote on 3. He compared himself to liking to play like Jason Tatum. Self probably thinks he's more of a 4-5. So we're going to see. There could be some headbutting there that could lead to over some questions. What's agreeable? What's some clashing? Does it lead to a Bill Self doghouse moment? I don't know. The thing is, we've seen highly rated players, this goes for across the country at KU as well, that don't work sometimes at certain schools. And sometimes it's, just about the fit, that the fit wasn't there, that it was trying to shove a square into a round peg into a square hole or something like that. And it's almost just becomes taking the high rated recruit despite the lack of fit that I think would be the worry here. Now, I don't know what's going to happen there with the position. You could also make the argument that you just take the top talent every single time and you try to make it work from there. And I don't have a problem with that argument. But in a world where you do almost have to like budget your NIL dollars, that there is a limited amount that you're going to get from your donors every year. And you have to figure out, okay, like if we spend this much money on this guy, that's going to leave us with less money to do this. Maybe it does make more sense to skip over on talent if it's not a good fit roster-wise. And so if he's preferring to play the 3-4, I do have questions about that. Or if you're going to view him as a 4-man for like a majority of the time, I also have questions about that because I don't love playing 2 bigs in today's day and age of college basketball. And if there's some questions about him defending in space, how's that going to go if he's a 4-man? But again, maybe you can convince him to be more of a 4-5. And if that's the case, like if we're just talking about the skill set, if we're just talking about Bryson Tiller in a vacuum, I really like what I saw. And I think he's very talented and he's a very good talent to work with. And my biggest question just is how smooth of a ride it's going to be between Bill Self and Bryson Tiller. Because I really like the player. I do have some questions about the fit, but we'll wait and see how that kind of works out for KU. All right, this is Locked On Jayhawks. Let's continue on with what it means for the class and KU in 2025. This episode of Locked On Jayhawks is brought to you by Zbiotics. Of course, with Zbiotics, they have their pre-alcohol probiotic drink. It's the world's first genetically engineered probiotic. It was invented by PhD scientists to tackle rough mornings after drinking. Here's how it works. When you drink alcohol, it gets converted into a toxic byproduct in the gut. It's this byproduct, not dehydration, that's to blame for your rough next day. Pre-alcohol produces an enzyme to break this byproduct down. Just remember to make your Zbiotic your first drink of the night. Drink responsibly, and you'll feel your best tomorrow. How to use it? Well, step 1, drink pre-alcohol. For the best result, make pre-alcohol your first drink of the night. Step 2, drink responsibly. Pace yourself, hydrate, get a good night's sleep. And step 3, enjoy tomorrow. Wake up feeling refreshed and ready to take on the day. Go to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege to learn more and get 15% off your first order when you use code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout. Zbiotics is backed with a 100% money-back guarantee. So if you're unsatisfied for any reason, they'll refund your money, no questions asked. Remember to head to zbiotics.com/lockedoncollege and use the code LOCKEDONCollege at checkout for 15% off. That is Zbiotics. All right, finishing things up on this episode of Locked On Jayhawks. What does this mean? So the class of 2025, you have Darren Peterson, you You have Bryson Tiller, that's 2 5-stars, and then you have Samis Calderon, who's a 4-star, more of maybe your developmental guy. And so you look at it, there's a lot of length, there's wingspan in this group overall, there's a lot of talent coming in. Now you have your big man in addition to your guard. Maybe they go for one more, high school recruit. Maybe that would be more of like a spring type of thing. And then the rest is probably going to be like transfer portal. Now, when you look at how this impacts the team for next year, you look at the possible 2025 to 2026 roster. If Bryson Tiller's a 4-man, it'd be more about what style would self-play. For instance, like let's say AJ Storr and Ryland Griffin both come back next year, which I don't know how likely that is, but I don't know. I guess Storr isn't having the season so far that you'd hope for, that he'd be able to go off to the NBA. But even if one goes, you'd have a guard, like could be Marco Jackson, could be a transfer portal player. You'd have Darren Peterson. You'd have 2 of possibly like Passmore, Griffin, and Storr to play the 3 and the 4, which means you'd have one starting true big in center, Flory Badunga. So it's possible that like a bunch of players go pro or leave or whatever, and then you start Tiller next to Flory. Does that work though? Because Flory's not a shooter. Tiller, like we said, can shoot a little bit better in the mid-range than from 3, but he's still working on the consistency, and the percentages haven't been great. And if you have questions about Tiller in terms of his agility, do you want him guarding wings at the 4 in some of those matchups? And so do you end up just playing Tiller as a backup 5 to Flory, where Flory gives you 22 to 25 minutes a game and Tiller gives you the rest? Or maybe Tiller gives you 10 minutes as a backup 5 and he gives you some minutes at the backup 4, and you play him, next to, even if Zach Clements is back for another year, like could you have a lineup with Tiller and Clements where you have one as more of the shooter, even though I'd have questions about the foot speed defense there. So either way, I would assume that Tiller is going to get minutes at both the 4 and the 5. But if they return all 3 of Ryland Griffin, AJ Storr, and Rakeem Passmore, that's more wing minutes. And I think it behooves Kansas to play more players at the 3-4 in that situation. Now, if they lose one or if they add another one in the transfer portal, that could change things. But there definitely right now seems to be minutes available in some capacity, right? It might not be 30 minutes a game, but I definitely envision Tiller being a rotation player next year for KU as things stand in some form or fashion. But it'll just be interesting to see what exactly that role is and if there is any grinding of gears between the two parties to figure it out. But if they can figure it out, like I said earlier, this is a very talented player that could turn into an absolute stud for KU down the road. All right, that'll do it for this long episode of our bonus episode of Locked On Jayhawks. We'll be back later today for a KU Oakland recap. This has been Locked On Jayhawks.